What's going on, guys? It's A2 Hoops, and today we're going to be going over the current Tier 3 teams in NBA 2K and ranking them from worst to best, letting you know what teams to use when playing friends or when playing Playnow online. I'm just going to say right away, this is my opinion, and what teams work for me might not work for you. Coming in at dead last, number 7 is my very own Portland Trail Blazers. What makes the Trail Blazers exceptionally bad in 2K, on top of how bad they are in real life, is their limited scoring options. The highest three-point rating on this roster is Jeremy Grant with an 82, which is the highest out of all of them. And their highest rated player is also an 82 with Anthony Simons. And this roster is just complete trash. Looking on the bright side, they have 4 players in the 80 overall club, but with 2K inflation, that really doesn't mean a lot nowadays. Following suit very closely at number 6, I have the Washington Wizards. The difference between the Wizards and the Blazers is like pretty tiny, but I'd say that there's a few key differences. The Wizards have 4 players in the 80 overall club, and their highest player tied between Valanciunas and Brogdon, both at an 82, which gives you somewhat of a scoring option. Brogdon has an 86 three-pointer, and Poole has an 84 three-pointer, so if you're good at timing your releases and getting open, then there's at least somewhat of scoring options on this team. With that said, their defense is rated as 63, so not going to guard anybody. Moving on to number 5, this was really difficult to choose between the next 2 teams, but at number 5, I'm going with the Nets. The Nets have some of the most three-point options on this list. Cam Johnson has an 87 rated 3, Dorian Finney-Smith has an 86 rated 3, and Bojan and Cam got an 83 and 82 rated three-pointer. So you could run a lineup of shooters, you could knock it down if they're left open, but with that said, they have 3 players above a 78 overall. And their highest overall is Cam Thomas at an 84. So if you like knocking down threes with Cam Johnson and friends, this might not be a complete garbage team, but otherwise this team barely has any slashers, definitely not going to lock down opposing defenses, and their ability to get in the paint is just very minimal on offense. At number 4, this was a really hard decision for me between the Nets and this team. I'm going to put the Jazz. The Jazz are very different in their scoring approach, but I preferred their method. So they have John Collins and Markkanen, who are surprisingly 85 and 84 overalls. I would personally prefer their paint presence on offense and defense in 2K. Now, this team seems super dysfunctional, and it is in real life, but if you can ISO score with Collins or Markkanen consistently, then this team would definitely beat the previously mentioned squads. For three-point shooting, your options are pretty limited. You got Sexton at an 85 three-pointer, Collins has an 84, so if they're wide open, they'll knock down a couple, but honestly, it's going to be a lot of ISO ball in the paint and hoping that you can play good defense. Here's where we make a notable jump on this list. At number 3, I'm personally willing to use most of these teams following this list. The aforementioned teams I wouldn't really touch in 2K if you could avoid them. But with that said, I'm going to put the Pistons at number 3. And I know it might seem crazy to have the Pistons this high, but they have the highest rated player on the list so far in Cade Cunningham at an 89 overall. And I would be happy to use Cade and company to try and beat my opponents rather than any of the aforementioned teams. With that said, this roster is atrocious. The rebounding situation is terrible. There is no good three-point shooters on this team. There is no good slashers. There's really no redeeming qualities other than just having Cade. But Cade is an 89 overall with an 84 three-pointer, and he's going to continuously get buckets compared to the rest of the guys on this list. You could just keep running pick and roll with him. You could run plays for him. It doesn't really matter. They really don't have anybody worth mentioning other than Cade. No offense, but that's why I have him at number 3. At number 2, I have the Raptors. Now, while the Raptors don't really have a number 1 guy in 2K that's as highly rated or offensively capable as Cade, they still have the most well-rounded lineup on this list. And honestly, you might prefer this team over any other team on this list. This is the only team with 3 players that are at least 84 overall. You got Podol, you got RJ, you got Scotty. And while none of these guys in 2K stand out to me, because none of them are great scorers in 2K, having all 3 while having quickly at the guard position makes this a really well-rounded group, especially compared to the mentioned teams. Only reason I can't put this team higher, their three-point shooting situation is not great, and they just don't have one particular reliable scorer. But at least you have Podol in the paint on defense, you got RJ on offense, you got Scotty on offense. Like, this isn't a terrible team by any means, but there's just no way they're better than number 1. And at number 1, I have the San Antonio Spurs with Victor Wembanyama, only player above 85 overall on this list, and he's not just higher than an 85, he's a 92 overall, only 90 overall club player on this list. And this team is probably not as good as any of the tier 2 teams, but this is definitely a step above all the already mentioned teams. Victor is a 7-footer with a 92 overall, really high draw foul, really high free throw rating. Weirdly, only a 77 three-pointer. Maybe that's just his percentage. It's probably pretty bad right now, but he's shooting a high volume. But that's bound to increase over time. Victor is a guaranteed offensive option, and he opens up the floor for players like Devin Vassell, who has an 84 three-pointer and can knock it down, 2K still seems to be glazing Chris Paul. He's at an 83 overall. And this team is one of, if not the best 3-point shooters on this list, with Harrison Barnes at an 88 overall 3 and 80 drive, which means he's a well-rounded 78 overall, which is really weird, but probably one of the best 78 overalls in the game. But with that said, this team would mop any of the mentioned teams, and I would personally say that this team is better. Thank you so much for watching. This is my current ranking of the tier 3 teams in NBA 2K. Let me know what you guys think, and thanks so much for watching.